Well, for the next 40 minutes, Dr. Marc Faber is joining us. Couldn't be a better time to have him on with the stock markets going down, Fed talking about not going into QE3. Dr. Marc Faber is the editor and publisher of the Gloom Boom and Doom Report, gloomboomdoom.com. And this is a short segment. We're going to have more time to go over this, and I will give the number out to take a few of your calls. Doctor, good to have you with us. Wow, what's happening right now in the world?
What is happening at this moment, but we have to go back somehow in history to know exactly where we stand. Basically, the markets peaked out in 2000, had a huge bear market until October 2002 and March 2003, and then a recovery move, and the new high in 2007 in October, S&P 1,576. Then we dropped into March 6, 2009 to 666, in other words, down 50%. And then we recovered to just the other day, 1422. So basically, from the lows in March 2009, 666 to 1422, we had a huge move in markets, not just in the US, but globally. But starting last year, markets behaved less favorably. Most emerging economies, stock markets haven't made a new high, unlike the S&P. And the S&P was on May 2nd, 2011, at 1,370. We are now 1,395 or so. So we haven't really made much progress. We dropped in between to a low on October 4th, 2011 at 1,074. So from 1,074 to over 1,400 was again a very significant move. I happen to think that the technical position of the market is very bad, and despite all the optimistic talk by economists and strategists about the great recovery in the economy, if I look at cyclical stocks, economic sensitive stocks, they're not performing well. So that tells me maybe this recovery is going to be disappointing.
We're going to go to break here in a moment, Dr. Faber. When we get back, I wanted to specifically discuss the fact that you've been pointing out for years that we've not had a recovery and that you think it's going to basically implode down the road. Many others, like Jim Rogers, have been saying that. We know that governments have been cooking economic numbers as well. So I want to discuss all that with you. But just briefly, as we go to break here, I mean, is the Fed signaling that they're not going to have more quantitative easing, or are they just raising the bar?
Put yourself in the shoes of Mr. Bernanke. The oil price is over $100. He knows that the statistics are all lies. He knows that the cost of living in the US are increasing at 5 to 10% per annum for the typical household. The S&P is at over 1,400. He doesn't need to do right now QE3. He can sit back and wait, let the S&P drop 100 or 200 points and come back in again and have front page articles saying he saved the financial system. So he's going to do it again as soon as the S&P drops, say 10, 20% at latest. I would rather think after a 10% drop, we have QE3.
All right, Mark, stay there. I want to come back and recap that and get into more detail, because some stations don't carry this first 5 minutes. I want to get back into that and where you see us going in the future. Dr. Marc Faber is our guest, gloomboomdoom.com. Dr. Marc Faber is our guest, and I'm holding here in my hand The Atlantic, its latest issue. It says the hero, Ben Bernanke. They're the bankers that created all the derivatives, that ran the scams, that got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. But he's our hero. Aren't we just blessed and lucky? And then the next article is about how Rahm Emanuel is a hero and saved Chicago. I mean, it's just a magazine about how they're wonderful heroes. I guess John Corzine with MF Global, he's another hero. I mean, these are all heroes. Obama launches all these wars. He's a hero. Give him another Nobel Peace Prize. While you're at it, you know, dig up Hitler and give him one. Dr. Marc Faber, again, is a preeminent economist and a researcher. He authors the Gloom Boom Doom.com, the Gloom Boom and Doom Report. And breaking this down, what is the real state of the economy? Is the system fixing numbers, manipulating them? What's happening with Bernanke and this announcement about no QE3 right now? Where is it all going in the world economy, Doctor?
Well, as I said, I think there will be QE3, but not right now. I think the moment the stock market drops 10% or more, there'll be QE3. And there'll be probably QE4 and QE5 and so forth and so on. I think once you engage in monetization of government debt, then to go back and retrieve it is very difficult, to exit this strategy. Last year, 2011, 62% of government debt issuance was bought by the Federal Reserve. And I think that will continue. And the other issue that is not spoken about much, which is even more important in the context of monetary policy, is actually the fiscal deficit. It's going to be very difficult to bring down the fiscal deficit. I think it will stay very high and actually increase because of mandatory expenditures that will rise over time very significantly. And if interest rates one day go up, then obviously the interest payments on the government debt will go up substantially. So I think we're in a very difficult position. But, you know, the stock market can go up because you print money.
So they're simply devaluing the dollar. The stock market's not really up. It's just taking more dollars to buy that stock. But, Dr. Faber, aren't you happy that we have heroes like Bernanke to save us? I mean, he's better than Superman.
Well, I don't know. Normally, The Atlantic is actually quite a good magazine. But recently, I think that they may have been manipulated by someone to print articles like Mr. Bernanke being a hero, when the fact is that he's the architect of the greatest economic and financial crisis since the Depression. He advocated artificially low interest rates that led to the housing bubble. He denied that there was a housing bubble and couldn't see it, and said it is well contained, and so forth. And I mean, as an economist, in my opinion, he's completely useless. Completely useless. So, you know, it's very funny that then he comes and becomes a hero. Now, I have to say, you know, if you create the greatest financial crisis in the world and you then apply monetary measures to support essentially markets, okay, that measure at that particular time may have been desirable, but it has a lot of undesirable and unintended consequences. Like the stock market went up, but the housing market didn't go up, and he wanted essentially to boost housing prices. And in the meantime, food prices are up, and energy prices are up, and the wealth inequality is up. The money that has been printed, it hasn't flowed to the working population. It's flowed essentially to the 1% of the population. I don't think they're 1%. I think they're a 0.25% of the population, basically to the super rich people. And I have no grudge. I benefit from that because these are my subscribers. But as an economist, and in order to stabilize the economy and create price stability, the Federal Reserve both Mr. Greenspan and Mr. Bernanke have completely failed, but completely. They've actually created much more uncertainty, much more economic and financial volatility. In other words, you have much larger swings in the economy, you have much larger swings in asset prices that are not particularly favorable for the investing public.
But, Doctor, isn't that good for the Goldman Sachs and other insiders who know when they're going to make announcements and know what they are? We have our own Congress here in the U.S. saying they're allowed to insider trade, and we have this article headline, Ben Bernanke saved the global economy, so why does everyone hate him? So they admit people see through this, but it is a very desperate gamble or gambit or stratagem to attempt to tell us that he cares about us when, as you said, he more than anybody is the architect of what's happening. So at a certain point...
Well, basically, if I were a conspiracy theorist, I would argue that the elite is intentionally impoverishing the population and enslaving the population through higher debts. You just look at, say, student loans. They're now close to $1 trillion, larger than credit card debit balances. I mean, these loans will be a huge burden on people working, and a lot of people will never be able to repay these loans. They'll be enslaved forever. And, I mean, the problem is really, it's easy to print money, and optically it looks good first. The problem arises that when you print the money, or in the words of Mr. Bernanke, you drop the dollar bills onto the United States, helicopters, you don't know what the population will do with these dollars. What can happen in a global economy where leakages exist, it can boost the economy of China and not the economy of the United States. It can lead to undesirable consequences in the US, such as overconsumption that then lead to trade deficit. The US trade deficit is offset by the trade surplus of China, and so it creates employment in China, capital spending in China, income gains in China, consumption gains in China, but not in the US. And that is the difficulty of monetary policy. And by the way, I am completely against any government intervention in the economy, because if you follow it really through, a complete government intervention in the economy is the totalitarian socialist communist state, and all of them have failed miserably, miserably. And so if people say, oh, we have to do something, and the elite, of course, they will argue, well, we have to intervene to avoid a total disaster and so forth. They're actually protecting their own interests and not the interest of the common man in America.
Dr. Faber, you say if you were a conspiracy theorist, and I understand that's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but the crony capitalist class that's anti-free market and wants the totalitarian system to secure their ill-gotten gains, they are scapegoating capitalism as the problem when it's been this insider system that's allowed this criminal transfer. Now,
Correct.
Okay, so you say I'm correct.
Capitalism. Well, basically, you look at the problem arose through regulation and through government-sponsored enterprises and through a manipulation by the Federal Reserve of interest rates by keeping them artificially low. And it's not the failure of the market. The market tried to solve the problem, first of all, through the SNL crisis in 1990, and then through the tequila crisis in 94, and then in 98, the market would have solved all the problems had LDCM gone bankrupt. That would have given a signal to the system, you're not allowed to leverage up too much, because if you leverage up too much and you go bankrupt, nobody will help you. But the bailout gave them the signal, yeah, there's a Greenspan put and then a Bernanke put, and just keep on leveraging, and you'll be rewarded for that. If you go bankrupt and you're the boss of the bank, they will fire you and you walk out with $100 million. And if you succeed, you get stock options and they go up in value, you got also $100 million. So where's the risk? I have to say, at least the hedge fund manager, he has his own money on the line. That's why actually very few hedge funds really failed. Some of them went out of business because of bad performance, but they didn't go bankrupt. The way the banks, essentially all of them are bust. They went bust, but they were bailed out by the system. If you're a small entrepreneur in Illinois or in Dakota or wherever that may be, and you go bust, nobody will help you. But if you're a big bank, they'll help you.
Amazing. I know it's 2 in the morning there in Switzerland, there in Zurich. We're very, very honored.
No, I'm in Zurich, in Thailand.
Oh, you're in Thailand. That's why it's 2 in the morning. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. What time in the morning is it there, Doc?
Now is 1:20 in the morning.
All right. Well, you were very, very nice to be on with us. We'll be back after this quick break. He was joining us from Thailand. GloomBoomDoom.com is Dr. Faber's site. I'm going to ask him, where is all this going? What can we individually do to protect ourselves? Straight ahead with Dr. Faber. All right, we've just got Dr. Faber for this segment and part of the next. I specifically want to ask him about what individuals should do because his track record's been pretty darn accurate on what's happening. What's his take on gold being driven down today? When does he expect Bernanke to bring in the QE3? And why has Bernanke made this decision? I know it's about squeezing the public while posing as the good guy, but what does the ruling class think they're going to do with all this? Because, I mean, sure, they grab all the money and power, but they wreck the society, so they're wrecking what they've actually captured. But I guess in war, a few eggs get broken.
Yes, this is precisely what I've been writing about. You know, even if you're the monopolist, there is a price above which you shouldn't go, because if you go above that price, the demand falls off a cliff. So even the monopolist, he has to maximize his profits with a price that is halfway reasonable. And I believe, intentionally or unintentionally, the so-called 1%, and as I said before, I think it's not 1%, but it's more like 0.25% of the population. They've driven their wealth to an extreme that actually at some stage will lead to a massive wealth destruction. Because each time in history you had a few people that were incredibly rich and the masses were kind of impoverished. It came to social strife or to hyperinflation or to revolutions or to war. And in war times, basically everybody loses out. So of course, there's some war profiteers, but they also lose out in the end, frequently with their lives. And so my view is maybe the well-to-do should consider policies that are more equitable to the masses. And I think what they should have done is oppose the money print by the Federal Reserve instead of encouraging it. Because don't forget, Wall Street has benefits from money printing in the sense that if markets go down and there is money printing, then the water level is refilled and the asset prices go up and performance fees come back in and so forth. So their tendency is, of course, always to encourage money printing.
If you were in charge, instead of the G20, what would you do to try to resuscitate the global economy?
Well, I think, you see, I disagree with the Keynesian theory that government spending stimulates the economy. I believe if you have $1 and you give it to the private sector, mistakes will happen. But the dollar will be invested more efficiently than if you give it to the governments, in particular if you give it to the Obama administration. It's a complete waste. That is the problem. And I think if you really wanted to revive the global economy, but the policymakers, they will not admit that. Austerity, in the sense to cut government spending 50%, that would help the global economy. But of course, the policymakers will make you believe that if you have austerity, it will be a disaster for the economy. It's like if AIG would have gone bankrupt, it would have been a disaster for the global economy. No, you just can ring-fence the operations that have a social function, like the insurance operation. The derivatives operation, you just kick out and let Goldman Sachs, Citigroup and JP Morgan solve that mess. And you guarantee the depositors of Citigroup and Morgan and let them essentially lose their derivatives position. And so I believe that the policymakers and the media and essentially the Keynesian economists, they all brainwash the public in the sense of telling the public, oh, if the government hadn't intervened through the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, the crisis would have been much worse. No, there wouldn't have been a crisis if they hadn't intervened with the government-sponsored enterprises already for years, and with the money printing essentially for the last 20 years. There wouldn't have been a crisis.
That's right. They create the problem and then pose as the savior. Joining us from Thailand, Dr. Marc Faber. We're going to come right back, sir, with a final segment with you to talk about what you think individuals can do on average and investors to protect themselves, because they're not going to listen to you or Ron Paul or others. They're going to go ahead with the Keynesian model. We'll be right back. You know, we did that Mark Moreno interview of Climate Depot, where we broke down all these academics saying arrest people that disagree with man-made global warming. And we talked about that professor that says we're mentally ill and need to be treated. YouTube took our video down and is threatening to suspend an account with 190+ million views on it. Again, that's the political correctness. That's how authoritarian these people are. And I'm going to find out who did this. It's time this professor, if she's the one that did it, has legal action, because I've had it with these people. They think this is the Soviet Union, and it's not. You better use your First Amendment or you're going to lose it. Dr. Faber, on a separate issue, there's all these calls to censor the web, to spy on people worldwide. I mean, why do you think the world is lurching towards authoritarianism, or do you disagree with that statement?
Well, I think that if you look at history, you know, even in a democracy, you get then our structures. And if you read Animal Farm, the regime starts always with good intentions, or even communism started with good intentions. And then you have an elite that comes out of it and abuses the system. And I believe the political class today is so much involved in business and in money making. As pointed out, the members of Congress, they outperform every other fund manager because of their inside information, that they don't want to lose power. And they realize at some point that it's not about representing the interest of the people, but it's about controlling the people, and that they need armies and police not to protect the people, but to protect them against the people. And I think we're moving into that stage now in the United States, and also, by the way, other Western democracies, whereas here in Asia and other emerging markets, we're moving towards a more liberal society. So we have different cycles in societies. And I'm sorry to say, in the US, I always feel that you are under threat And, you know, you go through an airport, it's like going through a Gestapo police station.
Well, you're right, Doctor. In closing, spend a few minutes on what you would do as an individual investor I mean, tell us what you're doing. Tell us what you're covering over at the Gloom Boom Doom Report.
Yes. You know, the viciousness of money print is that they are symptoms of inflation, but they don't occur all at the same time. So basically an investor should have been in NASDAQ stocks until March 2000. And after that, he should have been essentially long gold and so forth. And it shifts this inflation from one asset to another. It's very difficult to maneuver and know exactly what will happen and where the best performing asset will be. We all don't know how the world will look in 5 years' time. My advice to people in the US is I would hold some assets outside the US, whether it's real estate or funds, and I would have the custody outside the US. There's no point to own assets outside the US, but have the custody in the US. And so diversification is very important. Secondly, as you point out in your program, one day the issue may not be about performing well, but actually surviving and performing relatively well. In other words, when the whole world loses 90% of its asset base, that you only lose 30% or 50%. So I think that you should own some gold, and but you have to own it in physical form and not on leverage, that you can withstand the downside volatility such as we have now. We peaked out at 1921, $1,921 on September 6, 2011. We're now just a tad above 1,600, so we had quite a significant correction. I think we're still in a correction phase. And I would own some equities, diversified portfolio. My preference is for equities in Asia because I think they're cheaper and they have different yields. I can assemble here a portfolio of equities that would have a dividend yield on the portfolio of, say, 5–6% quite easily. So compared to government bonds, I think that's quite attractive. I would avoid 30 years government bonds, except maybe as a trade for the next 10 days or so. But by and large, I would avoid that asset class because I think that particularly in a deflationary scenario, fiscal deficit would go ballistic because the tax revenues would collapse. So in either case, inflation or deflation, you're going to lose money with your treasury bonds. And I think in the US, in the South, the real estate market, homes are now very reasonably priced by international standards. I've seen homes in Atlanta were cheaper than we could have bought here in Thailand.
In closing, Dr. Faber, who again is the editor and publisher of the Gloom Boom and Doom Report, gloomboomdoom.com, on the current path that the Keynesians are taking us on, clearly going for an authoritarian system, setting all this up, historically, what's your gut view on where all this is going?
As I said, nobody knows, but my best guess is that they will print money, and much more than they have. What we've seen is just an appetizer. Hasn't been anything compared to what is yet to come. And that this will impoverish the lower income groups, including the middle class. And then the social climate in the country will deteriorate very badly. And so the government, with their business friends, they will either target a minority group and attack them, or blame everything on the Chinese, and most likely they will then go to war. And eventually the whole system will completely collapse, the financial system. By the way, if the whole derivatives market, which is now a quadrillion collapses. It has an influence on agricultural land in the United States or on the lives of people here in Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand. I think it's a gigantic bubble that has to be essentially eradicated one day. It will vanish from the face of the earth.
Very well said. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us all the way there from Thailand now at almost
It's my pleasure.
2 in the morning. Thank you, Dr. Faber.
Thank you very much for having me on your program.
Thank you. All right, there he goes. Key information, some of his Skype breaking up from the other side of the planet, but it was intelligible, and we appreciate him joining us. I really enjoy it when the globalists try to poison us, and, well, we resist them via a free market system. Hello, my fellow info warriors. Alex Jones here, introducing you to the ProPure family of gravity-fed filters. Now, you know that the globalists are filling our water with radioactive isotopes, fluoride, lead, mercury, arsenic. And one of the few systems that can efficiently and economically remove or reduce down to non-detectable levels these poisons are gravity-fed filters. And ProPure is the top of the line. Their filters are impregnated with silver, a natural antibiotic. On top of that, they're bigger, so they filter faster. You don't have to prime these the first time you use them. It's amazing. Go to Infowars.com and click on the shopping cart link to see the entire family of these babies. Now, the fluoride they add to our water is so tiny that most filters can't cut it out. But ProPure has their system that will, again, reduce it to non-detectable levels, almost get all of it out of there. That's also available. And if you look at the different systems they offer, the ProPure Big Brush Finish is on a stand, so it's easier on a table or at your restaurant or wherever you have it to go up with a glass or a mug and fill it up. Then there's this big baby right here, the ProPure King large version. Got a lot of different options that come with it. Also, they have the ProPure Big, probably one of the best values out there. And of course, it's burnished stainless steel. And then what I use on my RV, something that's great for your hunting cabin or the back porch, is the ProPure Traveler. Small and portable, but packs a huge punch, cleans out all that garbage. They also have the glass sight spigot, so you don't have to take the top off and look in the bottom area to see how much water. You can see how fast it's filtering with this optional system. The globalists obviously are hitting us through our water. It's time to take control of our lives. It's time to not give our children and families these poisons, and these systems cut it down to non-detectable levels across the board. ProPure is the name. I only promote what I believe in. And I use ProPure in my home and my office. And I recommend that you check out the information on ProPure at Infowars.com. We already have the lowest price at Infowars.com on the ProPure gravity filter system. But when you add in the 10% off when InfoWarriors use the product code WATER at Infowars.com, nobody can top it. So again, it's a win-win-win. Stop drinking the poison water. Checkmate the globalists when it comes to your health, and support Infowars.com and the work we're doing here. You know, many revolutionaries rob banks and things and kidnap people for funds. We promote in the free market the products we use that are about preparedness. That's how we fund this revolution against the New World Order in our move to restore our constitutional republic and a spirit of 1776 worldwide. Check it out at Infowars.com. ProPure, top of the line, #1, most powerful and effective and economical gravity-fed water system in the world. ProPure, available, discounted at Infowars.com. Don't forget product code WATER to save 10%. It's the latest generation, years in development. ProPure is the name.